We practiced Sabbath because we had to. The whole country shut down, and we knew immediately that it was exactly what we'd been missing.
God's story, your life. Unfolding short stories.
From the moment Travis West said, "I do," everything shifted. Out of necessity, he began working twice as hard, caregiving, juggling side gigs, pushing through endless appointments. Years later, his Hebrew studies carried him and his wife Mariah to Jerusalem, where Friday night brings the whole city to a halt. In that stillness, Travis rediscovered an ancient rhythm. Some call Sabbath difficult, but Travis calls it a gift.
My name is Travis West, and I can still remember the moment that my wife and I fell in love about 25 years ago. We were seniors in college, and we were playing a game of Mad Gab, game where you have cards that have gibberish written on them, and you try and say the word fast so that the other team can guess the actual real phrase. It's sort of a sounds like game. It's a totally ridiculous game. C and I were playing with a group of high schoolers in the youth group that we were leading. The moment itself was so hilarious and ridiculous that it's difficult to capture in words. But for some reason, she and I ended up pretending to have very small, yippy dogs caught in our throat who were barking through our mouths. We found this exceptionally funny, and we just kept doing it over and over. And I have no idea how the high schoolers responded, because she and I were just caught in each other's tractor beams, and we weren't conscious of anything else that was happening. Well, a couple years later, we got married. And from the perch of our wedding day, we looked out on a glorious horizon. Two silly and playful kids ready to transform the world one relationship at a time. She was going to be an elementary school teacher, and I was off to seminary to study the Bible and not be a pastor. I didn't actually know what I wanted to do other than help people become more of their truest selves. And I thought seminary would be a good place to start. But then on our honeymoon, tragedy struck. But it didn't strike like a fist. It was more like a famine. It wasn't a blow that knocked us off our feet. It was a slow fade in which heaven simply stopped raining. And a couple of years later, we realized that we were starving. We realized on our honeymoon that something wasn't right. We were sleeping about 16 hours a day, and that felt excessive even for the exhaustion of wedding planning. So we cut our honeymoon short. We went home, and Mariah went to the doctor, and she was diagnosed with mono. Mono is the kissing disease, so we kissed on our honeymoon, and that meant that I had mono too. And we spent the next 3 months sleeping basically all day and all night. Eventually, I recovered, but she never recovered. A year later, she still had active mono. They called it chronic mono. They called it chronic fatigue. And over the next 15 to 18 years or so, she just had a snowball of symptoms and diagnoses that built and built and built. To this day, she has seen 75 different doctors, tried every diet and supplement you could imagine, and we have experienced significant grief and suffering, isolation, shed a lot of tears, felt a lot of resentment and resistance and disbelief, and a lot of anger, even rage at times. The poet Maya Angelou perfectly describes our experience in the midst of all this chaos. We had become what she calls exiles from delight. We were displaced citizens of the delight diaspora. Life just felt so hard, so heavy, so serious, and incredibly stressful all of a sudden. I responded to this situation by over-functioning. At home, I was Mariah's primary caregiver. Took her to every appointment. I sat with her in silence as she just wept at the mysterious loss of her vitality. But outside the home, I was desperate to make money and receive affirmation. I lived in a world of scarcity. There was never enough time, never enough money or energy or opportunity to make me feel safe and secure, and certainly not rested. Then, during the summers of 2006 and 2007, Mariah and I traveled to Jerusalem for me to study biblical Hebrew as a way of working out what I had discerned as a call to become a professor of Old Testament. What I didn't realize going into that summer was that the most important lesson that I would learn would come outside of the classroom. So today, Sabbath is still a cultural practice in Israel. And we practice Sabbath because we had to. Everything shut down. The whole country shut down. The buses didn't run. Jewish shops weren't open. There was nowhere we could go and nothing we could do. And we knew immediately upon being folded into this rhythm that it was exactly what we'd been missing. This rhythm of rest that would reorient us week after week back to being human, back to resting in the abundance of God and trusting that if I stopped racing around trying to save myself and my family all the time, I could finally learn that it actually wasn't my responsibility to do that at all. The problem was that once we came home after the summer in Jerusalem ended, it was almost impossible to sustain that rhythm of rest. We were really committed to Sabbath, but no one was modeling it for us. No one was doing it at all with us or around us. And neither of us had ever experienced Sabbath really growing up. So we just had to make it as we went along. The first 10 to 15 years of this experience were really hard. And to be honest, our Sabbath practice was not awesome. We kept at it, but in those early years, we spent more time fighting on Sabbath than resting. It really wasn't until about 5 to 7 years ago that we started taking Isaiah chapter 58, verse 13 seriously. Isaiah says, "Call the Sabbath a delight." It turns out that Sabbath isn't a rigid list of legalistic rules that we have to follow that force us into an outdated form of piety. Rather, it's a day that we set aside week after week to prioritize the people and the places and the activities that make us feel most alive and that reconnect us to our delight. This realization changed everything for us and our practice. And it began the process that's still ongoing today of slowly but surely finding our way back to that sense of delight and silliness and play that characterized our early love story that we lost in the intervening years. We're very different people now, 23 years later, and we've endured a lot of suffering. So our silliness is tempered by what you might call a healthy dose of silence and mystery. But we still love to laugh and goof around and be silly. It remains a struggle, though, to do that as Mariah's challenges continue to evolve and persist in terms of her health. But Sabbath is helping us come home to ourselves. One more step each week. It's still sometimes one step forward and 2 steps back, but that's okay. The Sabbath reminds us every week that transformation takes time. Becoming our truest selves takes time. Love takes time. And when love is the foundation and delight is building the house of our life, what I've learned is that we have all the time in the world.
I don't know all that many Christians who do Sabbath, but the ones that I do know of, they seem to have found a bit of that delight that Travis talks about. He recently wrote a book, and if you're interested to learn more, it's called The Sabbath Way, Making Room in Your Life for Rest, Connection, and Delight. You can find a link for that in our show notes, as well as a free Sabbath worksheet that Travis wanted me to share with you. It's a link on his website. Well, maybe you've heard the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I feel like those words are a bit of confirmation based on what we just heard. And those words come from Jesus in Mark chapter 2. The Unfolding is a faith podcast. You can discover more at myfaithpodcasts.com.